Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Recruitment Uncensored with me, your host, Kate O'Neill. You all know me by now. And I've got an amazing guest on with me today, Pete Ames. Thanks for
Hello,
coming on
everybody.
today with me, Pete.
Thank you very much for having
Welcome.
me. Amazing. Love it.
So, disclaimer for anyone watching, this is pre-recorded. So when you're watching this, we did this last week, but I've not edited it. So you know what the show's like when I do a pre-record. I've not edited it. It's as if it's live. The only difference is if you comment and get involved, which I would encourage you to do still, instead of us live bringing up questions on the screen, don't worry, me and Pete will comment and come back to you after the event. So still get involved, still throw in your questions. If you don't agree with something we've said or you love something we've said, still get involved. We want to hear it, basically. But today, I'm really excited for this because I don't know about you, but I want to get rich from my recruitment business or businesses. And so I know there's probably a lot of you watching that want to take a lot from this. We have got a lot to cover. So I'm going to get cracking with the first question. So, Pete, what do you think is the smart way to get wealthy from a recruitment business?
Okay, I can answer that very quickly and then I'll go into it a bit deeper, slowly and over time. Okay.
Okay.
And I think there is a vibe in the recruitment world that you build and sell. Yeah, you build,
Yeah.
you grow, and you sell. And the reality is that's very, very unlikely to happen for people.
Mm.
0.2% of recruitment businesses in the UK are sold any year. That's 120 on
Whoa.
average. 120 recruitment businesses are sold. And you never know for how much, and you don't know. I know businesses that are in that list that were sold under duress. So the actual odds of a big trade sale that brings in a lump sum of money is slim. And to be honest, and Mike, my boss and father, sold 2 recruitment
Ledge.
businesses, Ledge, for those kind of big sums of money, life-changing sums. And he admits himself both times there was a strong degree of luck. So
I did not
banking
know
on
that.
that
That
is,
is such a low percentage.
yeah, it's nothing. It's tiny. Um, but it's the dream. It is
Mm.
the dream. There's no two ways about it. So the smart way isn't to rely upon that sale. If you get lucky, if you build a business which can make you wealthy over time, the odds are it will be worth something, right? At the end, maybe not quite as much because the way you build it, but it will be worth a chunk at the end. But selling something from a position of financial strength, if I'm selling my house, I'm not only selling it because I've lost my job, I've got to downsize, and everybody who's buying it knows it. They'll screw me down on price. I want to sell from a position of, I'm cool, I can wait. I'll go for a different person because you've annoyed me. I don't need this sale. It's bonus money. So the right way and the best way to sort of discuss this is to point to another professional services, which is the law. In law, most of us know about the partnership structure. Partners are the top owners, the top leaders of a law firm. And the way they work, and I was told this once by a lawyer, he described it as the money bus. When you become a partner in a law firm, you take out a loan, a partner's loan, and you buy your way in to the partnership of the firm. And once you're in there, you then get to take a share of the profits from that business. And then when you're done, when you leave or retire, whatever it will be, you will sell your partnership back for pretty much what you paid it for. There is no growth in the ownership of the firm. It's all of that profit every year. That's how you make yourself long-term wealthy. And they take a huge chunk of that profit and they put it into an investment portfolio. Could be property, could be stocks and shares, could be whiskey, something that grows in value every year. And when you do that over sort of a 10, 15-year time horizon, the compound interest really starts to play a part. So you can get yourself quite comfortably to sort of a 2.5 million investment portfolio, which will sustain you for the rest of your life as income
Nice.
from just a couple of $100,000 profit a year. Compare that to what's required to sell a business. You need a minimum of £1 million EBITDA. There's actually 12 things you need to be able to sell a recruitment business. And it's not like if you've only got 10 that you get a lot. It's like if you've got 10, you don't sell. Size of your EBITDA, structure of your team, structure of your clients, nature of your income. There's a huge amount required, which is why only 120 sell. Whereas if you can get that sum of money coming out, if you can create this profitable business and you've planned ahead and sucked a chunk of that profit away into something, a pension, an ISA, whatever it may be, but it's accruing in value without you having to do anything, then after relatively short time, 10 years, you can be in a really, really strong position for retirement.
I just can't get over that number you've just said. It's like the 120.
Yeah.
It was 120, wasn't it?
120 on average. It goes up and down maybe by 10 across time.
And like you say, not all of those, some of those were sold under duress.
Yeah.
I honestly would never, I don't know what number I would have put against it, but I wouldn't have put that number against it, definitely.
Yeah, it's because anybody who has done it tends to talk about it, or anybody who's been involved in it. So there's a lot of people who talk about selling a business, but it was a business that was already up and running and they got some stocks and shares in it as part of, and then, so there's a lot of people who talk about having sold a business, but not many businesses get sold. A lot of people have a bite of that cherry when it gets gone. So the actual number is very low.
Interesting. Okay, so where do you see, because I know you work with a lot of recruitment founders, right? So from your sort of experience and the people you've worked with, where do you see people go wrong when it comes, well, with recruitment founders, when it comes to chasing this growth?
Okay, so I think because they're chasing the growth, they're thinking in terms of, they're not vanity metrics, but in a way they are. They're thinking about headcount. They're thinking about turnover. How many offices have we got? How many countries do we operate in? Numbers like that. And they're all mostly irrelevant if the key number underneath them isn't there, and that's profit. So a lot of people go wrong because they ignore profit, or they think about it as a secondary, maybe once or twice a year when the dividends are coming up, right? And then their attention's always, when are we going to get the next office? When are we going to break into that location? And what that then translates into is this huge series of very understandable cul-de-sacs and bear traps. Because they're chasing headcount growth, they hire people too fast. They're not picky enough on who they hire. They're a bit slow to get rid of people. They don't train them, or they train them
Sounds
for
very
too short.
familiar.
Yes, I thought it might. Yes. I've known a lot of recruiters who have been going sort of 5-6 years. Maybe they've grown and shrunk. That's a very common pattern, grow and shrink, because they outgrow their strengths in this way, skipping training, tolerating underperformance, things like that. And then I've explained this alternative way of thinking about building a business that's very efficient, slow growth, steady growth, produces lots of stable team, a lot of profit. And then one of them went back and did the maths on how much he'd spent on staff who ultimately failed. And he said, I nearly cried, because that's where I see the biggest thing. People burn their profit on people without then turning those people into efficient recruiters, or they bloat their operational costs. They get an office like 30 headcount too big on an 2-year contract that they can't get out of, or they sign everyone up for the fancy iPhones. They get really, really expensive cars, and they just load all of this pressure onto the business in such a way. They get super expensive marketing projects run to rebuild their websites and things that don't then translate back into efficiency, and burn the profit every year, chasing this pipe dream. It'll be okay because this is getting us to the sale. But never understanding what it takes.
Or it'll be okay because we'll hire another big biller and they'll solve all our problems.
Yeah, we'll hire another big biller. The way I think of big billers is it's kind of like planning to get your football team to the Premier League because you're going to hire 3 Cristiano Ronaldos. You're not. You've got to make do with average. And this is one of the things I strongly believe is, and we'll talk about this in a bit, but you need to find a way to generate profit from your business with average, good average, but average people who perform above average results.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big thing. So people's a huge one. The other one is, like I said, that operational overhead. And this is one of my rules, right? It's if you've got a team of less than 10, if you exclude their salaries, their commission, their national insurance, those kind of things directly related to your delivery team, take that away. That's your delivery overheads. Everything else is operational. Your virtual assistants, your accountants, your marketing spend, all those things, they're operational. 15 to 20% of your turnover is your budget for operational spend, no more. And I've seen businesses spending 60% of their turnover on operational spend with no clear line from that spend to more delivery and more profit. So grow slow, not fast with your team. Get them to be good, make them efficient recruiters, embed them, keep them long term, and keep a really tight control on your costs. Set yourself a budget every year between 15 and 20% and stick to it. And if you want to buy some more things, if you want to invest in some other stuff, earn more money.
Yeah, what you've just mentioned, I see it so often. And I think there was a lot of agencies with with the COVID boom we had, post-COVID boom, sorry. They had all this money, coming in,
Mm-hmm.
went to a nice fancy big office, for example, that cost loads of money. Kept hiring. Look how many people we've got. Look how many people we've got. Didn't necessarily upskill them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I did a post on this recently about, these people you've got that are hitting this average ceiling, you can make them better. There's some potential there, but you've got to put the time and effort into making them better, because anyone that's like, well, we'll just keep hiring experienced top billers, they don't grow on trees. And also they're very expensive.
Hideously expensive, often, not always, often hard to manage because they know, how good they are. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, in the UK, there's 30,000 recruitment businesses, right? And I think there's something like 120, 150,000 recruiters in the UK.
I thought it was more than that. I thought it was
something like 150 to 200, right?
Yeah.
When binomial distribution, right? The bell curve, yeah, which says most people are average, and then there's a chunk who are really good and a chunk who are really bad. Yeah. When you put those numbers through, guess how many recruiters come out as top billers awesome? About 30,000. So where do most of the top billers go? They mostly end up as directors or owners of a recruitment business through promotion or founding.
Mm-hmm.
You can't build around top billers. It's like, I'm going to build a team of Cristiano Ronaldos. You're not. Or one person is. That's the worst bit. One person does it, so everyone thinks they can, and it's luck in a lot of ways. So I think keeping really tight on things.
Grow your own, I say. I suppose some of those average people you could make there could be some potential there to grow them into better. But yeah, the other thing you said about the operational, the office thing, we've in Cardiff alone, we've had some agencies had to let people go and scale back, and you said they've sort of bloated and then they've gone back down again. I see this year as a real rebuild for a lot of agencies, because they've sort of let a lot of people go.
Yeah.
Either because they absolutely had to, or the performance, like you said, there was underperformers, and they're rebuilding again. And I think that I've spoken to a lot of people that have made that mistake, those mistakes you have just highlighted. So many people.
Utterly avoidable as well. Like, so many people have these stories. And I think recruitment does have a slight toxic positivity problem. There is a little bit, there's not enough talking about the mistakes, the lessons learned, because that lesson you've just described there, the big office, known so many. I've been doing this coming up on 10 years. Mike's been doing it for 20, nearly 40 years in recruitment. It's very, very common. But for some reason, nobody talks about it, so nobody learns from others. And that's, I think, something that we need to do more of as an industry. Share the hard lessons. what
Be
not to do.
vulnerable.
Yeah, be vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, this is the big one then. So if profit is the goal, as you just mentioned, obviously, like we were talking before we went live about like being busy and focus and everything like that. Like it's massive. So where should owners focus to actually become more efficient and ultimately obtain that profit goal?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's several areas, and these are all, we've got limited time, so these are all obvious. But there's a lot of obvious things that we don't pay enough attention to. So it's not that I'm telling you something you don't know. I'm telling you to pay more attention to something you already know and prioritize it more. But before I do those, there's one metric I think that everybody should introduce into their business as soon as you physically can, and it's your profit ratio. There's two profit ratios you're looking at. There's the profit ratio between how much you spend on your delivery team and how much profit you make as a percentage. And then the ratio between how much profit you make and your overall team spend. So if you have got other people in, you should keep an eye on that. Because what happens is whenever you hire somebody new, that profit ratio drops because they are not efficient. They're a cost for a while. And you shouldn't hire the next person until that profit ratio is back where it was. And that is a very good way to control the profit and avoid that dropout. So that's not a place to focus. It's like it's a shield to prevent you making a lot of different mistakes. That single ratio. So everybody should have that in their documents, and they should talk to their accountant to get it. But if we're looking to how to make those people more efficient, the first and obvious one is fill rate.
Yeah.
And I don't know about UK, but I am astounded how many people, when I ask them, what's your fill rate? They go, I don't know. Because every role you don't.
There's a lot that people don't know.
Yeah. And it's any role you don't fill was a waste of time and money, fundamentally. Now, getting that fill rate better, first of all, again, keeping an eye on it would be a big step forwards. But actually then looking at it, there's usually two ways to work your fill rate. One, you identify the roles that are dragging it down. I've done this work with several of my clients where we go over the last 6 months. And when you dig into it, you can find these little pots of, okay, there's 10 roles here that you have never filled when these criteria are in place. So stop doing it. Effectively create for yourself a vacancy checklist. And if it doesn't cross a threshold, don't work it. It feels like you're saying no to money. What you're saying no to is burning money. So get a vacancy checklist in place for what works and what doesn't. And then double down on what you do well. If you identify certain roles or spaces, and this can take time, but look for them actively. Pools of roles where they are relatively simple to fill for the time you invest, and there's enough of them. You don't need many of those for that fill rate to really truck up. And every time you increase your fill rate, you're not increasing your head count, so your costs stay the same, but you're making more money for the time you're investing. Yeah, so that's a big one. Reusing shortlists. So taking truly quality candidates to market. MPC has been around a long time. It's always going to have a place. But I think one mistake people do is they take anybody they can get to market. They're viewing it as a way to trying to just get someone to talk to them. And I think we should go back to really almost being like agents for high, truly quality candidates. Taking those back.
You don't just spec anyone out just for the sake of it. Or sometimes people spec out candidates they haven't even bloody spoken to. So
found this CV, they've said yes on email, I'll take them. No, we're talking about this person has been through because you've done all the work, right, to get that person onto a shortlist. That's where all your time goes, deliveries, candidate outreach, really. Done all this time to qualify them, test them. Maybe they've made it to second interview, right? They just weren't quite right. Someone else picked them at the post. That story is much better. Someone nearly hired them. They just weren't quite the right cultural fit. You're a better cultural fit. So reusing your shortlist, getting better at that, that's super important. Really drives up the value. And you can, because you've done all the work, you can make it a compelling price point as well. People resist that for some reason. I'm like, no, there's a story here about why it's lower. I can justify it because I've done all the work to get them, type thing. So those are two really easy ones. And then it's more into your space, which is coach, train, and invest in your people. This is much easier if you're confident they're there for the long term.
Mm.
So your hiring policies need to make sure you're getting people that align well with your business and have demonstrated behavioral traits, I would say, not necessarily skill, but they've demonstrated, and one of them is coachability.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big, big one for me. When people are hiring, you should see signs of coachability in your staff. And it's one thing, just one or two things at a time. I mean, this is your world now more than mine, but learn how to coach your team, because you've got trainers like you teaching people what they need to know, but they've got to practice it. And
Yeah.
you can't be there the
Needs to
whole
be
time.
embedded.
That needs to be done under your leadership as the owner, especially when you're small. So you've got to learn to coach and you've got to learn to develop your people, because from that will come higher fill rates, will come more shortlists, more training, more sales, etc. And wrap around them systems and processes. This is one thing I see in recruitment a lot, is there is inconsistency in how they do things. Like there might be a little flurry of doing some NPC work and vacancy chasing. Then they get a couple of roles on and they stop it. So for like 2 months, they're busy filling some roles, goes quiet, go back to it, and they reinvent the wheel, or they let every person in the business come up with their own version of doing it. As a leader, figure out the process that works best and that is repeatable, and train everybody in how to work to it.
Yeah,
Less
and
grace,
stick to it.
yeah, and stick to it. I know, those 120 businesses that sell. I've known a few people who were in those numbers or who are going to be very soon. And I see a very common trait amongst all of them. They are process minded. Like they've not been taught this from day one. They worked in a very procedural and structured way. And they're a coach, naturally a coach. So they trained their team to follow their processes that they identified. What we're looking to do is try and replicate that in how we run our business as well. All of those things will increase your profit.
And there was something that sprung. I'm going to do a quick roundup of the next show in a sec, but there was something that sprung to mind when you were talking about the vacancy checklist, which I think is an amazing idea. Is the ones that you're not filling. Sometimes it's worth looking at why, because it might be that they are worth just binning because maybe, I don't know, there's like a candidate, whatever, right? But sometimes it highlights a training need, because maybe they're not doing they're not sourcing effectively, they're not using the database enough, or they're not spending enough time on it, or whatever, or they're not building up proper talent pools, and maybe that's what you need to start doing, is doing that. I think that's a very, very interesting exercise that could show a lot, feed into a lot of the other points that you made. Is it a training need? Do I need to coach the team more? Is it something else? Just popped into my head then. I think that's a really good idea to do that exercise.
It's about behaving like an owner of a business. I think this is one of the trouble. A lot of recruitment owners struggle, especially in the early years, to transition from being a recruiter, looking at their desk, looking at the pipeline, looking at the candidate lists, those kind of things. If we've got enough people in, am I going to get a placement? You've got to be that for quite a while in your first few years. But also, you do need to make time to sit back and do all of that leadership stuff. Look at the numbers, ask why, figure out solutions. That's leadership. And, we find with a lot of our clients, that transition is partly why they come to us. They know they want to make that transition and they just don't know how to do it, and they want some guidance.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to you because I know you've got a top tip to share, but I wanted to do a roundup of the next show. So I'm really excited for this because I've never had a guest on who's TA focused. So this one I'm really looking forward to, and I think it will benefit a lot of you watching. So I've got Tom Brown coming on with me. So Tom Brown's got 2 businesses. So he is the founder of, I'm looking at my notes because I always forget, Root Embedded Talent. And he's the founder of Televo, which is sort of a brilliant learning platform for TAs as well, and recruiters. So I can't tell you the exact thing we're talking about because I forgot to find out from Tom, but I do know from our previous chat, we were talking about, I know most of my watchers, you are agency recruiters. how you can better work with internal TA functions, because we have to do it quite often, and we need to sort of value that partnership to get more out of it. But that could change. I can't promise we are going to talk about that, but we probably will. So that one will be live 14th of May at 12:30. The event will go out at some point next week, so keep an eye out for it and definitely come along to that one. Okay, I'm going to come back to you now, Pete, for your top tip. So know your end goal. Talk to me about this one.
We've not quite touched on it, but it boils down to the same problem. People don't understand how much they actually need to achieve in long term. I want to retire. I want a certain level of income. Well, how much does that need to be, and how am I going to get there? Like I said, it's investment. You can work back from that. You've got to figure it out. Once then you work back, how much profit you've got to be investing each year into your investment. You know how much you want to live your life with. You can reverse engineer that to gross profit. You can reverse engineer that to turnover. You can then turn that into a shape and size business. I do this. This is a workshop I run. I did it yesterday with 10 recruiters, going from, well, okay, what do you want in life, to how big does your business need to be? And I promise you, it is almost always much, much smaller than you think.
Yeah.
And that avoids you then growing to some misunderstood and burning your profit, your future, on growth chasing that you don't need to do. Most people can get themselves long-term wealthy, millionaire level wealthy, with less than 10 staff, very comfortably.
Yeah. And to be honest, like, I'm not saying if you want loads of stuff, I'm not saying don't do it, but me personally, bloody hell, more than 10 would be so stressful. Like,
more than 10
I
means
just,
a management layer. Yeah, management layers that don't build, you build, and all of a sudden you're falling into a trap that so many have fallen into before.
Yeah.
Where you end up with a team that's 3 times the size and the profit is the same literal number. You're just working harder to make the same amount of money. Don't do it.
Yeah. And this has made me think, like, because if you said, we were talking again, we quickly talked about this before we went live, know your end goal. I probably naively have thought I do know my end goal with both my businesses in the last however many months, but actually I don't. Like, I've realized that now. Like, I couldn't give you any specifics. I might say, well, I want to make good money and have a nice life, but what does that actually mean? Because my idea of a nice life and earning money could be different to yours and the next person. So I need to do this exercise myself and work that out.
Yeah,
Because
everybody
it's
does.
important, isn't it?
Every business owner needs it. You cannot reach a destination if you do not know where that destination is. You will just get lost and go in circles and backtrack. Know exactly what your North Star is. This much money every year to live my life, to build my wealth, and over a certain time frame, 10 to 15 years, which, to be frank, is what you've got to do to sell. Nobody builds and sells with less than 10, really. Much more towards the 15 and 20. Knowing that will save you from so much wastage, so many burnt years. And if you hit it early, you can wind back, you can have a better lifestyle. You can, so many people I talk to plan to hand the business to their team in a little management buyout, a little bit of bonus money. Or, and this is the other thing, I do say this to people, build that kind of team that is incredibly profitable, and you have created a really solid foundation for a quick dash of growth.
Yeah.
All the processes, all the experience, all the training to get average people, right? There is no reason you can't then spend a few years scaling up and creating something of interest to a trade buyer and joining that 120 a year.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've absolutely loved this today, because I feel like it's given me loads of motivation, but also a bit of direction of what I need to do as well. And I will certainly be sending the show to quite a few people, because I just think there's so many people I'm speaking to at the moment that are a bit lost with all of this. So if any of you want to connect with Pete, which I would suggest you do if you haven't so already, he's tagged on the event as the speaker, so it's easy to connect with him. LinkedIn's the best way to do so. But you mentioned a workshop that you ran yesterday that's related to this. So if you've got what's going on with that in terms of things coming up?
So we're putting the next few dates in the diary. By the time this goes live, if people go to my profile, look for my featured section, in that featured section will be a link to the next few dates. It's free. We do limit the size so that there's not too many people in there, and it's an hour. So please come along, because I had some fantastic feedback from people who came yesterday. I've had about 3 phone calls this morning, people changing their plans, thinking differently. It really does make you feel better about what you've got to try and do. I promise you.
Yeah, so another reason to slide into Pete's DMs basically and look for that featured post. But look, thank you so much for coming on with me today. I've loved it, and we'll definitely get you back on another time for sure. But yeah, we've hit the half an hour mark now, so we're done. So anyone that watched, remember, if you've commented, we'll come back to you later. If you've still got things to add it in. We will be keeping an eye on LinkedIn. But otherwise, I will see you all in a couple of weeks. See you later.
Little bit.